I've been following the Norwegian Singles Approach for 5 months now. If you are currently unaware of what the Norwegian Singles Approach is, this probably isn't the video for you. I won't be rehashing exactly what the method involves or how to execute it in this video. I'm just going to be talking about my experience carrying out the training method. So click off now and go and watch one of the now many other videos covering the method if you want to know more about how to carry it out yourself. To be clear, from this point onwards, I will be assuming that you, my dearest viewer, have at least a general understanding of what the Norwegian Singles Approach involves. And before we go any further, I want to be clear that I don't think the Norwegian Singles Approach is magic, and I don't think it's some sort of groundbreaking behemoth. Nothing about it is new information. It's just been packaged in a way that makes it easy to understand and pretty accessible for what we're going to refer to as the serious hobby jogger. Right, as a little bit of background context, I started following the Norwegian Singles Approach after recovering from an ultramarathon in late summer last year. I decided I wanted to put in a roadblock over winter to work on my overall leg turnover and speed and whatnot. While training for the ultramarathon, I'd become pretty aware that my aerobic capacity had a lot of room for improvement. So I opted to try the Norwegian Singles Approach because the simplicity and the ease with which it would fit in around the rest of my day-to-day life was really appealing. It offered a very straightforward way to work on an area of my running arsenal that was very weak in comparison to other elements. Prior to running the ultra, I'd spent the spring and summer of 2025 just sort of building up my mileage a bit. I was trying to work my way up to being able to run 100-kilometer weeks, but I wasn't following a plan. I was just easy running and relatively frequently doing races. So I basically just built up to being able to do 100 kilometers a week and then held it there for a little bit before tapering for the ultra. Okay, let's take a look at the face value statistics of the training block. My 10k PB has been improved by 3 minutes and 22 seconds over the last 5 months. This occurred over 2 10k races, neither of which I put in a proper taper for. I have not targeted a flat 5k during this time, but I have unofficially taken 7 seconds off my 5k PB in the first half of Skegness 10k recently. Prior to following the Norwegian Singles Approach, I had struggled to really even get close to my 5k PB that I set back in 2019. And the 5k time trial that I ran about 3 weeks before starting following NSA came to 22:59. So there's been quite a big improvement over the course of the block, even without having targeted a 5k at any point. I've missed 3 days of running in the last 5 months. My average weekly distance covered has been 90 kilometers, fluctuating a little bit in and around race weeks, and I've typically spent between 9 and 11 hours running, depending a bit on weather and energy levels. I will circle back to talk about my time on feet in a bit more detail. My longest long runs have been 25 kilometers, and I've completed 47 interval sessions thus far. I've got 4 more left to do before the half marathon, which should bring me to 51 out of a total potential number of interval sessions of 54. There was some adverse weather while we were away in Denmark after New Year that just prevented me from doing intervals, so I basically just ran the volume that week and didn't worry too much about trying to get any intensity in. So that's a very surface level look at how the last 5 months of training have gone. Now I'd like to get into what I personally feel are the strengths and weaknesses of the Norwegian Singles Approach based on my experience with it so far. The strengths: it's very easy to use. Doing the same 3 interval sessions every week is very straightforward. All I've had to change is maybe occasionally adding a rep or maybe changing the length of a rep. I'm periodically updating my guidance pace ranges for my interval sessions based on race results and the improvements that came with them. Nice and simple. I don't really have to think about it. Doesn't change much week to week. This means it works really well alongside a more normal adult working life because the mental load is really low. It efficiently develops an area that is weak for a lot of runners. Most of us are going to benefit from just improving our aerobic capacity, and most of us will get consistently faster just working on that. You can sort of view it as going after low-hanging fruit. The way I've come to view it is there's not necessarily much point in me reaching for more complex workouts or workouts that are really working on like sharpening my speed when I don't have the aerobic base there in the first place to make the most of those more specific sessions. And I was getting faster by just doing more aerobic volume. So by adding in sub-threshold work, it's just sped up that process a little bit. And it does it in a way that's pretty sustainable week to week, which, as I've already said, is pretty good alongside a normal adult working life. It's a good way of getting in a consistent level of quality volume. Because it's all at sub-threshold, you're not really ever going into a big hole that you're going to struggle to recover from. I have found it pretty easy to bounce back from the workout so that I can get my easy runs done the next day and I'm ready to tackle the next interval session, and that has facilitated a good level of overall consistency over the last 5 months. It does train you to learn how to race, but I'm going to circle back to this one when we get to the weaknesses because I think there are some caveats here. So the method does recommend that you do some sort of race stimulus every 4 or 5 weeks. This can just be a time trial, it could be a race effort park run, or you could enter a race. But because of the relative frequency of these efforts, it just gets you used to racing, gets you used to deciding how to approach the race effort in terms of the food you're having beforehand, responding to nerves, responding to a race environment if you've entered a race. So having these frequent race stimuli baked in is really helpful for building that experience. Even if not all the efforts are goal races or like genuinely flat out PBs, it does still stack that experience pretty steadily. It does force you to keep your overall effort under control. And I think this is a good thing. If you run the workouts too hard, you'll know about it pretty quickly. If you're running at easy days too hard, you'll know about it pretty quickly. It just won't be possible to execute the plan. It's really difficult to hide or ignore problems. When it's executed well, the level of work you're doing with the Norwegian Singles Approach should be very manageable. But the second you start drifting off and running things too hard, the problems crop up very, very fast. So you have to be honest with yourself about your paces and your efforts. Forces you to behave, otherwise it'll all fall apart. I think it's a great base training program. You can theoretically just maintain this workload indefinitely, so it's a really good one to just do year round, and then when you've got a race that you want to work towards specifically, say you want to train for a marathon, you can jump into marathon training off of Norwegian Singles really easily. The same goes for if you just want to work on steadily building your aerobic capacity between goal races and then put in a special block or a specific shorter block closer to race day, then again, I think Norwegian Singles works pretty well in those instances too. Weaknesses. Doing the same 3 interval sessions every week is really, really boring. Most of the training block has been fine, and I have generally managed the monotony fairly well. There have, however, been days where I've had to pretty much drag myself out the door because the idea of running tarmac loops in the dark and miserable British winter weather was less appealing than hammering rusty nails into my own eyes. So that's not been ideal, but I think maybe the issue is more that just running any kind of interval session in the cold, wet and dark alone just sucks. So it wouldn't really matter what training plan I was following, it probably would have just sucked regardless. So there's not really a way around that other than having people to train with. My schedule doesn't really accommodate that, so I've just had to deal with it. I would say if you're a pure runner for enjoyment runner, then NSA is probably not the plan for you, but then any kind of structured training probably wouldn't be the plan for you either. It's a very broadly applicable training method, and while that's great for someone like me who does just need to work on their aerobic capacity a lot, if you're a more well-developed runner, NSA probably does fall short in a lot of ways, and it does lack that more specific work that you're likely to need if your training is already quite well developed, your aerobic base is already quite well developed. But if you are one of those runners, it probably means you're more in the sub-elite category and you would be doing different training anyway. One key problem worth mentioning is I felt it left me feeling very uncertain of how fast I could actually run. The method seems to work best for distances from 5k to the half marathon, but you don't touch 5k or even 10k pace during training. So in the 4 or 5 weeks between the race stimuli, it can be easy to feel a little bit lost and uncertain. Easy for negative self-talk to creep in because there's not that sort of regular weekly confirmation that race pace is there. I reached a significant low point before running Skegness 10K where I felt shit, everything was shit. I was convinced that I was just not going to be able to even come close to my original half marathon time goal. The weather was awful, it was dark, it was wet, it was miserable. I felt like I was running through treacle every single workout, and it was just mentally very hard work. Didn't feel like I was getting anywhere or making any progress. Didn't even think I'd be able to get close to 45 minutes at Skegness 10K. But again, a lot of that probably was more to do with the weather than anything else. But the lack of confirmation definitely wasn't helping. I managed to convince myself to go out at 45-minute pace at Skeggy 10K, and just at the very least I'd get an unofficial 5K PB. That took the pressure off, and then as it turned out I felt completely fine and very chill at 5K despite running a 5K PB unofficially, and ran a 45:04. Sub 45 only being denied because I stopped for like a full 15 seconds to try and sort my shoe out. So you have to have faith in the process, and you have to have faith in your own abilities. Initially, it's possible that'll be very, very hard, and for some people that could lead to a lump of self-doubt forming, and that can be quite hard to work through when you're not hitting those faster times on a weekly basis and you're not getting that confirmation really regularly that race pace is happening and is there. I do think this is a big negative in the early stages of following the Norwegian Singles Approach. Once you're further along in the process and you're a bit more used to carrying out these race stimuli on a regular basis, then it becomes much easier to push those thoughts aside and just trust the process. Since Skeg 10K, any anxiety I had about the half marathon has gone completely. Feel fine, feel like everything's on track. I feel like I'm not only going to easily achieve my original time goal, but I've had to adjust it to a faster one. It was unfortunately just really rubbish for the sort of 3 weeks where I felt like everything was shit and I was never ever going to be any good at running at all. Okay, I'm just going to cover some stuff that I've done a bit differently to the vanilla Norwegian Singles Approach suggested format. As I alluded to earlier in the video, I've been working on ultramarathon distances mostly for the last sort of 4 years. So coming into this, I was already very used to doing longer long runs. I like doing them, I've got the time to do them, and I didn't see any value for me personally in cutting the length of those long runs. And I do have other goals beyond the half marathon, so I still wanted to make sure that those longer efforts felt fairly normal and fairly relaxed, which hopefully means I'll be able to adjust a bit more quickly when I rebuild after the half marathon. So my long run length has been quite a bit longer than the vanilla NSA approach would suggest that you do. I do also run commute a couple of times a week to work usually, so I will end up doubling on my easy days. I don't think this is explicitly stated as like a bad idea or anything in the vanilla NSA approach. Just feels relevant to note that on some of my easy days I'm doubling. So that all means that my time on feet has been higher than the method would maybe suggest. I just wasn't willing to cut the length of my long runs down, and it doesn't seem to have hurt my fitness or affected my race results in any negative way at all. I did also dive into the method a bit too aggressively at the start. Pretty much whacked in 90 minutes of sub-threshold right off the bat. I did not ease the sub-threshold volume up gradually. Wouldn't recommend doing this. I don't think it's just a particularly smart way of doing it. I've been doing regular heavy strength training for over a decade now. I have a background in other sports like parkour and free running, Muay Thai, bouldering. So my overall level of physical robustness, shall we say, is probably quite a bit higher than the average runner. I can absorb a bit more of a beating before I start to develop niggles that are disruptive to my training. So while my initial ramp up, it wasn't even a ramp up, my initial jump up into NSA training was very aggressive and inadvisable, really. It was a calculated decision on my part. Don't copy that unless you also happen to have an extensive background in power-based sports and heavy strength training. All in all, I'd say that on an emotional level, my experience has been mixed. As discussed, had a very rough patch before Skeg 10k, but since then I have been feeling really, really positive, except this morning on my interval session where I felt terrible, but that's pretty normal for me at the beginning of a taper. Generally, the training's been feeling great, the running has been feeling mechanically very smooth. I have no worries whatsoever about the half marathon. The only thing that's going to change my target on race day now is if the weather ends up being ridiculously awful or something, but we'll talk about specific goals and stuff in the next video. In terms of results and performance, the results have been good. I've made a much bigger improvement on my 10k than I have previously and over a much shorter time scale. And to actually finally crack my 5k PB despite not even targeting a flat 5k race feels good. I know I'm just not gonna have a tapered flat 5k on the plan for the rest of this year, but I think I might actually be able to keep taking slices off my 5k PB just in whatever random 5ks I end up entering. It's useful to note that my interval paces have also become much faster. I updated my workout suggested guidance pace ranges after each of the 10ks, and I've seen the very slowest end of my suggested pace range go from 5:19 a kilometre to 5 minutes a kilometre, and the very fastest end of my suggested pace range go from 4:50 a kilometre to 4:38 a kilometre. I do think I would have got faster and improved generally just following really any program that had a consistent level of mileage and intensity, but I think I maybe would have felt worse and probably not made such a big improvement. Just do think it's worth acknowledging that at my running level, at my like relatively mediocre amount of running talent, any amount of consistent volume and consistently applicable intensity is going to result in success. NSA is not the only way of doing that. I have no major complaints though. I'm in the best shape I've ever been, and I feel like I haven't had to train as hard for it as I have when I've been following more intense training plans in the past. I feel like I've built fitness steadily and in a way that feels sustainable. And I feel that continuing to follow sub-threshold training in some format would just enable me to keep steadily building that fitness and that capacity. And doing that will just enable me to keep getting steadily better and probably get me 98% of the way to my potential over the next few years before the old perimenopause kicks in. Am I going to keep using it? After all those positive outcomes, the natural answer would be yes. However, road running is not my primary running discipline. This winter road training block has effectively been a side quest. I'm going to have to make changes to accommodate the training for the goals beyond the half marathon. Fully planning on continuing to use sub-threshold training in some format. I'm just going to have to shift it around and adjust it, structure it differently, but we'll get into that in a later video. I'm now into my taper for the half marathon, so all the meaningful training is done. Certainly in terms of training that's going to have any real impact on my race day fitness. The next 2 weeks are just more about keeping things ticking along, keeping the engine running, making sure I still feel ready to run fast on race day. Main task is to stay healthy, reduce the volume smartly, reduce the intensity smartly, get to the start line in one piece, and execute the greatest race performance of my life. No pressure, no pressure. Next week we're going to go over that race plan, new time goal, strategy for race day, etc, etc. And we'll see how I'm feeling once I've got less than a week to go. Right, I remembered that I'm supposed to tell you to like and subscribe and stuff, so if you have enjoyed the video, by all means drop a like. If you want to keep up to date with how the half marathon goes and anything beyond that, then subscribe to the channel. But you're a creature of free will. I can't tell you what to do. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.